Okay, so in this video I'm going to cover some of the more subjective topics of a good custom face rig controller. I'll be using 3D Studio Max and animation wiring for this demonstration, but the same principles can be applied to any animation software that you're using. You could even make a little animation editor and rig controller like this right in the engine of your choice if you wanted to give the game designers or animators a way to do some quick face animation. But this is a good example of a custom face rig controller for animators. If you don't know the basics of how to create controls like this and hook them up to your rig, there are some good tutorials already out there, and I would recommend starting there before continuing with this video. I made this character in Reallusion's character creator. I really like all the available face shapes, or in this case, morph targets for the face. So let's see how I hook them up to the controller. One thing you might notice is that all of them move along the y-axis with respect to their parent. And all of them will set the character back to the root pose when they are at 0. This is important for a few reasons. It simplifies the code, and it also allows the artist to set them back to the root easily. It also makes it easy, for example, to make a reset button that sets them all back to the root position. And I've also tried to reduce the number of labels when a simple spline illustration will do. And I generally try to keep the sliders moving in the same direction of the face muscles. Clamps are a good idea. Clamp the slider itself and clamp the values in the code. This keeps the controls a lot more robust and foolproof for the artist. Here, the slider is clamped in the IK settings so that you can't move the slider off of its little track. And here's the values in the code. And you can see that each of these little wirings can take if statements. So this is what the code looks like. Some sliders, such as Joy and Blink, control more than one shape. Combining controls into a long slider with positive and negative values are a great choice for shapes that are mutually exclusive. So here the Blink can close the eyes, but it can also widen the eyes, which is its own blend shape. The values in the code for these negative directions are basically just the inverse of the negative direction. This mouth open slider here is an example of a slider that controls both a shape and a joint rotation. This character has a blend shape for the mouth opening, but it still relies on the joint to actually open the mouth. So just to show you what I mean, this is the character without any rig controls, and this is the blend shape for when the mouth opens, and you can see it just moves the skin and the neck muscles, similar to what happens when you open your mouth. But the joint is actually what's going to open the mouth, and this way the lower teeth and the tongue, which are their own meshes, move with the joint. And here is the code for the mouth opening. So it's still clamped in the usual way, but then we take that value and we multiply it by the amount we want to rotate, and then we add the initial rotation converted to radians. So the controls for the eyes are a combination of all of the things that we talked about so far. The X and the Y direction each have a positive and negative. And there's a whole set of blend shapes that keep the lids moving with the eyeballs to give it a much more realistic gaze. And obviously these eye controls are only to complement the animation for the face. Perhaps in a later video I will be able to show you what a runtime eye controller looks like in the engine. So that way we can do things like make points of interest for the character, depending on what they're supposed to be looking at runtime. But for now, these eye controls give the animator a way to animate additively on top of an animation that might already be playing at runtime. And here we have the controls for the tongue, very similar to the eyes, in that they have 2 dimensions and they move from the negative to the positive direction, and rely on a whole set of morph targets or blend shapes to keep the tongue moving where this little slider is. Now you might notice that these controls can make a good variety of shapes with the mouth, but there's no specific controls for each phoneme for speech animation. That's because if I was going to animate the speech by hand, I would not rely on little controls like this. I would probably make a rollout with buttons and sliders for each phoneme that control a whole set of morph targets for each one. And that way, as I go through and animate each phoneme, it only requires one button click rather than tediously manipulating each slider like this. I'm not going to show you that though, because there's a lot faster ways to get decent looking face animation than sitting there and keyframing each phoneme by hand. So I'm going to show you that here in the next video.